Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 16 of the Growth and Gratitude podcast. I am so thrilled to have a very special guest with us today, a friend of mine, Gillott. If you want to know the behind the scenes scoop about what happens during a crisis and who those behind the scenes people are helping individuals and companies, organizations through these crises, you're going to learn a lot today. And my guest has some very, very valuable information for all of us about managing and even better, avoiding a crisis in the first place. So welcome to the podcast, Eden. Thank you so much for being here. And as you know, we always start the podcast off with gratitude. It's growth and gratitude. And so before I even introduce you, Eden, even though we've given a little hint that you are in crisis PR and you're a top expert in that field, I just want to ask you for the first thing that you share with us to please tell us 3 things that you're grateful for right now in this moment.
Coffee, always coffee, because with coffee, anything is possible. I'm also grateful for you and also getting to spend time with you. And it's always a great time to just chat and catch up with you. And then I'm also grateful for my network because I cannot manage my life without the people around me. So
Excellent. I could not agree more on all 3 counts. Coffee, definitely the way to go. And I'm so happy to be here with you, Eden. I'm so grateful for you making the time. And I'm so thankful for our network as well. And that's how we met. So we met through the Entrepreneurs Organization. We've known each other for a number of years. We were in an accountability group together for a long time. We went to many learning events, many fun times, many learning experiences together, many drives and rides to the events that we went to. And I cherish those times. And I enjoy every moment I get to spend with you. So thank you for being here and thank you for your friendship. And I'm going to introduce you, but your bio was a little bit humble, so I might add some things to it and ask you to flesh it out a little bit more, Eden. Eden, you are known as the dumpster fire fixer. I love that name. That says it all. And you manage the optics for a variety of crises in both public and private arenas. And Eden, you lead a strategic communications firm that partners with law firms, businesses, and nonprofits around the world. And everybody, you must check out Eden's books. She is the author of 3 fantastic crisis PR books. She's a TEDx speaker. She's a frequent contributor to major media outlets. And no matter what she's doing, she's always providing practical insights for navigating PR challenges. And she has taught me so much. I'm so excited that she's coming to the show today to teach you about crisis management and much more. But Eden also has an MBA. She has university teaching experience. She is incredibly fit and strong. I believe it is it Spartan races that you do where you're in the mud? And tell us about that too.
Oh man. All right. So Spartan races, very briefly, they're obstacle course races because I can't just run by itself. It's like I have to run and then also scale over like 7 feet walls and then pick up heavy things and kind of put them back where you find them. Kind of brings you back to being a kid again.
Yeah, that sounds fun, but it also sounds incredibly challenging and grueling. So I admire you for doing that. And you're always up for a challenge. I love that about you. So we want to learn all about how to avoid a crisis and how to deal with a crisis should we find ourselves in that position. So I know that one of the ways that you have that's really helpful for explaining this is to understand the stages of a crisis. So can you tell us about those stages? And then we'll look at how you help people through those stages.
So in the kind of strategic communications bubble, so not everything is a full-blown crisis. You have 3 different stages. You have the proactive stage, which I liken very similar to going to regular checkups to go see your doctor, where nothing is particularly wrong. You just want to stay in optimal health. So like as a person, optimal health physically, but as a business or a nonprofit, optimal health for your business or nonprofit. So some of the things in the proactive stage, they're in the this may happen. Some of the things that people would say to me are going to be things like, this might happen, but we're not exactly sure what we want to do. We're hoping that maybe you can either help us avoid it entirely or at least make it less bad. Or they might be saying something like, oh, this is how we hope it may turn out, but we want to just figure out all the ways that things can go sideways. So those are my proactive clients, the going to the doctor for your annual checkups, or sometimes a little bit more often. Then you get these emerging issue stages people. These are the ones that like, something's kind of bit off. It's like when you go to urgent care. So these are the ones where people are coming to me, they're like, oh, I just want to run this by you first. So they are planning to do something, but they just want to run it by me first. Or they're saying something like, what are your thoughts on this? Or maybe my team and I find ourselves in a situation where, and then they start laying out the tea for what's going on. And then the final stage, the crisis stage, the one that everyone loves to talk about, that's the one that's most like going to the emergency room where something is super severe and very, very time sensitive. And so the clients that come to me in the crisis stage are saying things kind of like, I wish I'd called you sooner, or my social media is blowing up in a bad way, or reporter from the New York Times is calling, or my absolute favorite is when a client actually called and said, and for any of you who have kids in the room or don't really like cursing, I just earmuffs for this one. But a client ended up saying to us, drop whatever the fuck you are doing and come over here and help me fix this shitstorm. So those are the three stages of the clients that we get: the proactive, emerging issues, and then crisis.
Thank you, Eden. I love that analogy. It's something everyone can relate to. Your regular checkups, then when things are don't quite seem right, make sure to take action, be on top of it. And then when it's really full blown, you really need support. And I know that you have different ways of supporting your clients and folks through each of those stages. So could we just look at those a little bit more? How am I, if I'm a business, or I'm a nonprofit, or I'm a celebrity, I mean, this could be anybody. I want to avoid a crisis. I don't even want to have to even dip my toe into that emerging crisis stage. What are all the things, or some of the top things I can do to just avoid it altogether? And how would you help support people in doing that?
Yeah. So in the proactive stage, that is the easiest place to avoid something because nothing has even happened yet. And so that's a good time to go through kind of like a checklist of looking at things. And for example, with nonprofits, a lot of the nonprofits that we work with have money go missing. And usually what ends up happening with money going missing is that the same person that is receiving the money is also the same person that's writing the checks or paying things with credit cards. We find like fake invoices kind of pop up, not kind of, but they do pop up. Making sure that your financial controls are in place, or making sure that if you're not sure about regulatory rules or some employment issues, reach out to that attorney or whoever it is, that expert, to get the advice first, because usually people are going, oh, we can handle this, we got it. They don't check with anyone, and then they end up landing themselves into trouble. And for certain businesses, there are going to be things that kind of crop up more frequently, depending on food, healthcare, education. You'll end up seeing things in the industry that, even if you look at other people in your industry, things that are happening with them, going, well, if this happened to us, would we be prepared? It's kind of a nice way to look at it.
Excellent tips. So everyone can take advantage of those tips. Everyone can learn from those tips. And it seems to me that it's similar to other areas of life where we don't want to have to deal with something once it's already a big problem. These are the things that we need to invest the time in before there's a problem, so that there's not a problem. And probably you hear people looking back, or you help people look back and see, well, if you would have just done this earlier on, we wouldn't be here in the full-blown crisis. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So we find that usually the people in the truly proactive stage usually tend to be the much larger corporations or very, very large nonprofits that have everything really buttoned up. They've had a whole team that have been looking at things. Most of our clients, I would say, fall into the emerging issue stage, surprisingly enough, and not full-blown crisis. They're going, ooh, I see it coming. This is probably going to happen sometime soon. And we just want to make sure they know what the issue is, the base issue. And they're like, well, we don't know. For example, there was an employment issue that had come to us, and they were doing an investigation, and they weren't sure how the results of the investigation were going to come out. So we actually ended up creating 3 different versions of announcements depending on how the results of the investigation are going to come out. So it's not a full-blown crisis, but it is an emerging issue because it's kind of bubbling, not like a full-blown boil, but it's kind of simmering around, and you want to just kind of keep your eye on it.
Very interesting to create 3 different messages before you even knew what the outcome was going to be.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. That's really smart. So the emerging crisis stage, now seems like a really critical point where you could make some bad choices there that make things a lot worse, or you can scale things back. You can really be on top of it and deal with it so that it doesn't turn into something really catastrophic. So what are the do's and don'ts of that stage?
Time is of the essence on this one, because with that, every second ticks, not as quickly as when you're in full-blown crisis, but you still have the ability in the emerging issue stage to maintain control. You haven't completely lost it. You still have not as many options as you would have if you were in the completely proactive stage. You may have 2 or 3 instead of like the possible like 10 beforehand. First of all, you have to figure out what your goal is, no matter which stage you're in, because if you don't know what your goal is, then you don't really know what you're working towards. So figuring out what your goal is, and then in the emerging issue stage, kind of figuring out what are the 2 or 3 likely scenarios for it, and then preparing for those.
Okay. I love that, knowing what your goal is. I think we've talked about in the past how your goal can't be for everybody to love you and everybody to be supporting whatever it is you're doing. You have to be
Yeah.
reasonable about, you're going to have raving fans, and all of us are probably going to have people who aren't happy with what we're doing or don't agree with it in some way. And that's fine. And we just want to keep that at a reasonable level and not be losing customers, losing opportunities, or not able to help the people we want to help because of misunderstandings or because of things that have been taken out of context, or that people are blowing up into something that it's really not. Everybody deserves to be able to tell their side of the story, as long as they're telling the truth, hopefully. And I do want to say that Eden has very ethical standards for who she will represent. She's not out there representing people who are maliciously harming others, and Me Too people who are probably deserve to face whatever
Yeah.
consequences they're going to face. But there are lots and lots of people out there who are just being canceled, if you will. And canceled does not mean just paying reasonable consequences. There is an idea behind it that you're not really being given a fair shot, that maybe everyone just made an instant assumption based on one piece of information, or extended that to make all sorts of other accusations that really don't have any basis in reality or evidence. So we should all believe that everyone's innocent until proven guilty, and everybody deserves a chance to tell their side of the story. Is that right?
That is very true. And to your point about the goals, actually, just last week, I was on a phone call with somebody, and they were explaining what they were looking for, but they didn't quite have their goal nailed down. And I was like, well, what are you looking to achieve? And they were like, oh, I don't want to make anyone upset. I was like, well, that is not going to happen. And she was like, oh, you're right. I guess like, even if you just breathe right now, there's going to be somebody who gets upset. There's no perfect wording for something. Expectations and setting appropriate goals. But yeah.
Exactly. So tell us about the full-blown crisis stage. I think that a lot of people see this happening in the media, celebrities or CEOs or heads of nonprofits, whatever it may be. They just get destroyed. It seems as if there's no coming back from that. I know I'm getting to the end of the crisis stage where it just feels hopeless. I want to believe there's always hope. I want to believe that sometimes people can redeem themselves if they have a good cause and they have an explanation for things. What does that look like?
All right. Well, there's two different answers for this one. Yes, there is always hope, but always it depends. But in terms of looking at the news and seeing the stories that are out there, like a really good crisis, or a crisis well managed, is one that never makes it into the press. Or if it does, it's so kind of boring that you're okay, and it's easily forgettable, right? So if I do a really good job, you will probably never get to hear or read about it. It's actually really interesting because when I talk about clients, I usually also try not to talk about clients that are in the public sphere, and especially not when it's happening, because people love to play the guessing game where they think that they can tell what's going on. I remember a few years ago, I was working with an attorney on something, and our mutual client ended up in the news, and he wanted to talk about it, and that's totally fine, but I didn't, because of confidentiality rules. He wasn't bound by the same sort of things. And somebody actually called me up over the weekend, was like, I saw a story, sounds like what Stephen was talking about. And I was like, don't know. Does sound familiar though. To your earlier question about is there hope? Can you redeem yourself? Yes, you can, but it also depends on the individual that has, especially if it's an individual that's facing the brunt of being canceled or the brunt of the negative attention. It's, does that person really want it? They may want it, but they may not be in a good place emotionally or mentally to deal with all of the negative stuff that's just going to start coming out of the woodwork during that time. So you not only have to be sorry for whatever mistake you may have made, but you also have to be willing to put in the hard work in dealing with all of the noise that comes along with it. And it's totally fine if you're not in a good place for that yet. You can have the best teams supporting you, but if you physically are just like, I cannot get out of bed and deal with people right now, then all of your advisors combined can't shove you towards it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You have to be ready. And sometimes I do see people just kind of retreat and kind of check
Yeah,
out for a little
that's
while,
totally
maybe
fine.
regroup, get some support, maybe some mental health support. And then when they're ready, they can come to someone like you and get some help in figuring out how to rebuild and how to kind of start over again in some ways.
Mhm.
So I'm curious about the communication recommendations specifically, because my field is communications
Mhm.
and as well, we share a lot of there's some overlap in some of what we do. And I know you have some really good recommendations about what to say, what not to say, how to say it. I know I've heard you, not to take away one, but one that really always stands out to me is just tell the truth, tell the darn truth. Whatever happened,
Yeah.
don't try to cover it up because it's going to come out one way or another. Tell the truth. What else would you add to that, or what other communication tips would you add?
I always keep mentioning, I'm like, I feel like I've just said this so many times, and some people just don't get it. So, in addition to telling the truth, is also be careful what you put into writing. In the news, there's constantly something where, oh, old emails have emerged, or old text messages where people are just like making fun of a whole large group of folks, or they're talking shit about their clients that they're supposed to be representing. Please be careful what you put into writing. I usually advise my clients, if you don't want it to show up on the front page of whatever newspaper or your favorite blog or whatever, you don't want like a screenshot in a documentary on Netflix showing up, just don't put it into writing. Pick up the phone and call people if you have to. Yeah.
Very,
But
very
in
important
terms of
tip.
like
Yeah.
the larger, there's so many recommendations I could give about the do's and the don'ts. You want to make sure that you have your goal set. You want to make sure that your goal has reasonable expectations. And this is before you even start putting anything into writing. You also need to start thinking about planning for the long term, because something that might sound really good right now, if it won't hold up in the future, then it's as you might as well not even do it in the first place. You also want to make sure that in your communications, whatever you're promising that you're going to be doing, you actually have to want to do that change and put in the work. You can't give people lip service, tell them what you think that they want to hear, and then not back it up with action, because that also will hurt you more than if you had never said anything in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've said before, if you're working with someone like Eden, make sure to tell your representative everything. Don't hide.
Mm-hmm.
I know you're using it figuratively, but I love when you say, tell us where the dead bodies are. Right.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's not figuratively, which is the crazy thing. But yeah, generally, I don't deal with dead bodies.
Wait a minute. People are going to wonder. Now, if someone has
Um,
committed murder, you're not going to hide that, I assume.
yes, that is true. But
But
it's,
you need to know. You need to know.
I do need to know. For example, when somebody comes to me, as you were mentioning about needing to know all the things. So when somebody comes and tells me whatever their situation is, I mentally just start going through what happened, what didn't happen, but should have. For example, we had somebody that had come to us and they were getting in trouble for some content that was on their website. I won't get into it, but I was, who approved this? And they were like, oh, no one approved this. And I was like, well, who was supposed to approve this language? Because it was heinous. But anyway, so it's what happened, what didn't happen, but should have, who knew what happened and when did they know it? Because this is usually when you catch clients' timelines that are kind of like a little bit fuzzy. What's already being said publicly? What are the perceptions that are already out there? Because everybody comes to a situation with perceptions, and a lot of my work is managing those perceptions and hopefully changing them a little bit. But the people who are very much anti you or pro you, you really aren't going to change them too much unless you do something bananas. Another thing I think about is what's likely to happen. So it's thinking about the different options. And then I guess it's also, in addition to what are the options, it's also like, what are the implications of each one of them? And so figuring out, for example, we had somebody else that had come to us and said, my goal is to put this person on notice. It was the darker side of crisis PR, which is litigation PR. And they were, this person has wronged me, and I want to basically put on blast what this person has done. And they explained all the situation. And then they had mentioned that they have a child, and they were, I'm still trying to protect my child, and I don't want my child really to know all about all the cheese Well, if that's your end goal, while you are hurt by this other individual, if your main focus is to protect your kid, don't blast it all over the place. Don't go and try to get this into the press or make this video go viral, because it will get back to your kids. So as much as this is like a litigation PR strategy for one thing, if you're trying to get the other side to settle, if your main focus is completely at odds with it, in this case, it was protecting that person's child, then go with that one if that's truly where your heart lies.
I love that. So it's really not one size fits all. It's not come to Eden or come to Gillott Communications, your company, and you're going to get this answer for your problem. It's you really want to understand what are all the goals, who are all the people impacted, what could the fallout be if we choose option A versus option B versus option C, and the options. Ideally, there are multiple, and you have to really weigh what's most important to the people involved. I think that's really important to be aware of. Yeah. So when people come to you, they're really looking to you to help them figure out what's the best course, which you do in collaboration with them based on what their goals are and what the situation is. And then you help with the communication. And I'm wondering about, how do you decide the best ways to communicate? Should it be a tweet? Should it be a message that you put out into a mainstream media platform? Should it be a message that you send to your customers? Figuring out what's the best way to send a message. What is the message? Any tips on that?
Oh man. Okay. Yes. There are so many tips on this. So in terms of where and when and how and all the things. So where is mostly wherever, especially in a crisis, it's where do the people that your most important stakeholders, the people that are most important to you, where are they used to getting their information? For example, they're used to getting their information via Twitter, then make sure you respond to them on Twitter. Don't go black. A lot of times clients get really overwhelmed. We have to be everywhere. And I'm like, if you're not normally everywhere on the TikTok or whatever it is that they want to call it, if you're not normally everywhere, you don't have to be everywhere during a crisis in order to communicate with people. Sometimes the best is that you actually don't want to blast it everywhere. A lot of the times, especially with the nonprofits and money goes missing, you want to just pick up the phone and call people, because that's also really powerful. Oh, but a point about the social media accounts and being everywhere is, and this is on the proactive side, is you want to make sure that you lock down all the different handles for your company or organization, even if you're not going to be using them, just so that somebody else with nefarious intentions doesn't make a fake account, make it look like you, and then either try to extort you or have your account say crazy things, even though it's not you, but it's made to look like you.
Really good recommendations. Really good recommendations for all of us and all aspects of life, really. Even if we're just using social media for fun, we could get ourselves in trouble if we don't make the right choices there. Use the right kind of communication channel in the right way, and be very, very mindful and careful and thoughtful. I think just like what you said about putting anything in writing, anything that goes out into social media, we want to skip a beat and take that minute to go, how could this be perceived? What might I be conveying that I don't want to, and that I don't really mean, that could be misconstrued? Yeah. So I know, Eden, you are considered, and I just want everybody listening to know, you're really considered one of the leading experts in this area. And I've been with you many times at learning days and events where your phone is just blowing up. Some celebrity has done something and it's all over social media, or some famous person, and they must have a statement from Eden Gillott or Gillott Communications. And what is that like? How do you know what to say? What kinds of things do they ask you? And I know that's not necessarily your client. So if you can clarify for us how that happens, and they're reaching out to you and they want your statement, tell us about that.
Yeah. So often I'm reached out to by the media as an expert for comment. So for example, Bud Light recently got into some trouble, and Inc. magazine reached out to me and said, based on this current situation, current events, what do you think about their $200,000 donation that they made? Bud Light is not my client, so I was able to comment on it, and they had 5 or 6 different questions they'd ask me, and I offered my professional advice that if I were to be advising them, or things that I would be considering. The tricky part about the expert commentary actually is, though, because there's so many things that go into a strategy. I don't know how they ended up coming to this decision. I assume that there was a large group of folks and everyone was jostling between there was legal, and well, not for this particular one, but usually there's like legal and HR, and then there's communications, and then there's usually a whole bunch of, or a whole gaggle of folks that are trying to figure out the best strategy forward. But yeah, so in terms of media reaching out to me, asking me for comment, that's one thing. The other thing is the media will not reach out to me for comment for my clients because I am usually super behind the scenes. If I end up telling my clients, here are the words that you're supposed to be using, or the comments or the statements that you're supposed to be putting out, and it's supposed to be reassuring and calming of there really isn't like a there, or this isn't like that really big of an issue, but then all of a sudden your crisis PR person marches up as the spokesperson for it, that sends a completely wrong message. Although there was this one time, this is not what I wanted to have happen, but our client was on board, the lawyer understood, but then the EA that had answered an email from the Hollywood Reporter CC'd me on an email to the Hollywood Reporter saying, no big deal here. And then I was, no, first of all, I know that reporter, but also, no, you don't want to say there's no real story here to the Hollywood Reporter and then have the crisis PR person CC'd on the email, sends the wrong message.
Yeah, they know your name. Once
Oh,
they
yeah.
see your name, that's a little bit of a red flag. As wonderful as you are, people know what you do because you're
Yes.
one of the best at it. So yeah, sorry.
I'll see clients out in person and I won't acknowledge. It's all up to them. If they want to come up to me and say, sure. Or if they come up to me and then I've had clients that have come up to me, they've been with their husbands, wives, friends, whoever it is. And they're like, oh, hey, da, da, da. And somebody was like, oh, how do you know her? Whatever answer that they want to give, I just follow their lead.
I love that. Yes, we work out together at the gym, or I know you from walking our dogs, that I don't have one.
In the
but
same
no.
social circles, or
Right,
just around,
right.
even knows everyone, like whatever answer
Right.
they want to give, I just run with it.
And I know we're not promoting dishonesty here. We're always saying be honest, but this is to protect people's confidentiality and privacy, which is really important and something to be honored. And I think that whatever it takes to do that, and if someone needs to think that you know each other through some other form of connection to keep that privacy and that confidentiality, it's perfectly understandable. Yeah, I think that's interesting. You mentioned something about being calm, and I did want to bring that up because I know that's one of your superpowers, and I'm wondering if people are wondering the same thing I always wonder, which is how on earth do you stay so calm in all these really difficult situations with incredibly stressed out people who are terrified that their lives are being destroyed, and you always kind of seem to have that calm center. How do you do that?
So for me, it's because I've seen a lot of things. So a lot of people come, it is the craziest thing, the worst thing that's possibly ever happened to them. And I probably have 2 or 3 stories that are very similar to it. Not that it's happened to me, but of other clients that I've had. So it's better, or it's easier for me to be calm because I'm like, all right, I've seen this, I know how to handle it. Or maybe if I haven't, I mean, you've never seen like the exact same situation twice. Oh, like they have common threads, and you go, all right, well, this is likely to happen. It's kind of like a little computer AI system in my brain. It's kind of like running through all the different things. I'm like, all right, looks kind of similar. I'm not going to treat it the exact same way, but we'll kind of approach it, see how it goes, depending. But yeah, so in terms of like the person themselves and how they can harness the bit of like the superpower that I have about being calm is take a breath when something bad happens. I understand, like, especially during a crisis, and I say like, time is of the essence, but you always have time to take a breath. And just even when you're talking to a reporter may ask you a question, you don't need to immediately rush out with the first thing that comes to mind. You do need to answer them back. Take a breath, think about, remind yourself why you're doing it, remind yourself what your goal is, try to straighten out your thoughts. Because usually when people are stressed out, it ends up just wrecking whatever chances you have of being able to think clearly. And when you can't think clearly, you'll make mistakes. And when you make mistakes, you make things worse. So just take a breath. It'll be okay.
Yeah, I love that. And I would think working with you, that's very comforting and calming when you think this is the worst thing that could ever happen. And your PR rep is calm and says, no, I've seen things like this before. And this is what we do. And these are some of the options that you have, and take a breath and let's just talk about that. That's such a gift that you give to people. And I have no doubt it's appreciated. We hope, everybody out there, that you don't have the need for someone like Eden, but should you, I can only imagine that the way that she shows up for her clients is incredibly comforting and helpful, as well as having all that knowledge about what to do. So Eden, what would you say? What have we left out? I mean, we've had a good, rich conversation about, I think that's honestly, I'll say for everyone listening, I think this is relevant for every single area of life. Even if you're not running a company, you're not a celebrity, we all have situations where we could make a choice that we later regret. And so we want to, first of all, avoid that and try to take that breath and be mindful and think about the impact of what we're about to say or do. But also, if we do have regrets and things go awry, we can apologize, we can take responsibility, we can not just hide and deny, we can speak about what's happened and engage with people. I always think about the example with my daughter when she came out. I was pretty shocked, and I said some things that I now realize were not helpful things to say, were not super supportive and affirming, just in my confusion and questioning her identity. And she has shared with me how much that hurt and how much she wishes that I would have responded in different ways. And I took full responsibility. I've apologized, I've learned. And I think that's just more of a personal example of how what Eden's talking about is relevant for our everyday lives, just making really careful choices, honesty and integrity and authenticity, but really thinking about the impact of the things that we say and do, so that after it's become some huge problem, or so that we avoid it becoming a problem, but we're not looking at it after the fact and going, oh, I can see that I made a mistake there, that we really take the time to avoid those situations. So that's my kind of summary and takeaway and a personal example. But I want to ask you, what have we left out? Because I know you've written 3 books. I mean, obviously we've left tons out. People go and buy her books and listen to her TEDx talk and look at all the great information she has out there. But just for this short conversation, is there anything you would add to what we've shared with folks about your amazing tips for avoiding and managing crises?
So the one thing that we've kind of touched on, but I haven't just full out and said, is remember, yes, you can breathe, but you don't have to go through this alone. Call somebody, call a friend, call a family member. I find oftentimes people going through a crisis, they say, or they feel as if no one's ever gone through this before. They've catastrophically effed up or something bad has happened, and they end up trying to retract and be very isolated. And that only makes things worse. Maybe the person that you talk to, like your friend or family member, can't help you fix the actual root part of it, but it'll make you feel like you're not alone. Ideally, you would call somebody like your attorney or whoever it is that you need as counsel to advise you on it. But just remember that, breathe, remember what your goal is, and remember that you're not alone. You don't have to face this all by yourself.
I love that. And if someone does need support from someone like you and Gillott Communications and what you do, where would they find you? Even if they're just interested in learning more from you, where can people find you?
There's so much content on my LinkedIn. So if you search for my name, Eden Gillott, it looks kind of like Gillette the razor minus an E, kind of. Actually, if you just search Eden and then dumpster fire fixer, in terms of at least right now on LinkedIn, that way you can find me. I have tons of free content. There's contact information for me there. If you want to just run something by me and go, this is the situation that I find myself in, are you the right person? If I'm not the right person to help you, I will refer you over to sometimes, whether it's the other side of PR, the happy, positive side, or oftentimes it's really you need a lawyer to be speaking to. Yes, there may be an optics issue, but if the root problem is going to be legal, then you should talk to legal. But the dumpster fire fixer thing, I just want to mention, that was actually something that a client had said to me once a couple summers ago. And I immediately, this is amazing. And I immediately ran to my IP attorney and was, let's figure out how to get this trademarked. We have to go figure this out now.
That is so cool. That is the best title ever. It's so fitting for what you do. And I'm so glad that you trademarked it. Dumpster fire fixer. Eden is the only person you will find if you look that up. She is the best one out there, the only one out there. So, all right. Well, this has been so much fun, Eden. I always enjoy spending time with you. We've had lots of great times together, and I so appreciate you sharing these really important really helpful tips. I think that somebody listening, if not many people listening, will be able to avoid a crisis or at least manage a crisis so that it doesn't blow out of proportion. And they're just going to find the tips so incredibly helpful. I hope people will continue to follow you and check out all your work. Yeah, you're super active on LinkedIn. I love all your articles there. And I know you write a lot and speak a lot. So people will be able to find you easily, everybody out there. And I thank you so much for being here. It's been great fun to chat with you. Thank you. All right. Bye, everybody. We'll see you next time.